The Jets' top line reminded LA why Winnipeg was a President's Trophy team last year.
Your Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HOLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously the Jets just played the Kings yesterday. Big win and a big response after a frustrating loss against the Stars. Not the happiest home opener, but it is what it is. The Jets then reminded people that, even with all of the injuries that the Jets are, certainly going through right now, this team still has some firepower. And against a team like the Kings that, maybe the Kings have their own issues too, some of which are not too dissimilar from the Jets. Winnipeg can still really flex its muscles, especially some of its star players. And I don't think that's anything more true than talking about how the top line, the top D pairing, and Hellebuyck did. We'll dive into all of that individually. Also talk a little bit about an additional injury that has now been picked up and how the Jets are going to respond. And also give some thoughts on the first Moose game of the season. Manitoba is very hyped this year, and I think it looks pretty good so far. We'll dive into all of that coming right up. But before we do, wanted to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com, and you can win $300 if your first $5 bet wins. Now, like I said, the Jets star players really flex their muscles in this game, and I think that is probably a sign of a couple of things, right? So the Jets have their own issues, but I think no one will deny that at best, you have some of the league's top scorers, right? Scheifele, I still don't understand how he doesn't have a 100-point season yet. You've got Connor, who has been perennially one of the league's top goal scorers, and Velarde, who has been a growing force both at 5v5 and certainly on the power play, which we know he's a lead at. But Morrissey really stepped up, I thought. Hellebuyck had some massive, massive saves, some of which I just could not believe. And, in a game where the Kings definitely outcreated the Jets at times, especially in dangerous chances, it was Winnipeg who was both more clinical and whose stars really stepped up. I thought, LA really pushed the Jets at times on those rush chances. We kind of knew that might be a problem. The Jets defense right now is ailing a bit, so it's not like this is super shocking. I think we understood that, Winnipeg's going to have to sort of give and take, especially while they're still without Sandberg, Perfetti, and of course Lowry. So while they're going through this, the Kings are not exactly the strongest opponent they can face, but LA has always been an opponent that has given the Jets absolute fits. And I think this was one of those games where Arneal tried to make the most of some lineup matchups that really favored the Jets. For instance, Dumoulin and Ceci together on their back line got absolutely cooked, and the Jets made the most of that matchup. They certainly had their way against LA's bottom six and middle six. Aside from like some really strong shifts from, I'd say, like the Kings' top six, it wasn't a very easy night for them. Again, they definitely outcreated the Jets with some of their most dangerous chances that really came off the rush and from some individual Jets defensive mistakes, but it's kind of to be expected, right? The shot clock looks a little more even. Wasn't quite as even as it might seem, but in a game like this, sometimes you just have to take it, right? And I think Winnipeg's top line and top D pairing going absolutely ham really carried the day. It was super impressive to see Scheifele score, some great markers himself. That final deflection that he had, that was a very sharp angle opportunity from Josh Morrissey's point shot. Ridiculous, ridiculous deflection. Super impressive. What a day from Scheifele. And, this has to be the year where he hits 100 points, right? Like, there's no way he can't not hit 100 points. I know that's kind of ridiculous, and 100 points is insane for any player, but I just feel like Scheifele is one of those guys who's been primed for this sort of season for a long time. And now that, the Jets are really going to be leaning on them, and hopefully they can start winning some of these matchups against upper end opponents, I really do hope that he's able to hit 100. That'd be awesome. I'm sure it's not really likely, but I just feel like it's a really cool career milestone. Even breaking 90 points would be great, right? Let's set our expectations within reason. 100 points is pretty nuts for anyone. But if there's a player that I think has the talent to certainly do it, Shifley is one of those guys that I'm just shocked hasn't yet pulled it off. I did actually get pretty close with my score prediction. I think I had the Jets at 4-2. They ended up winning 3-2. And if there's a particular moment that may have gone slightly under the radar, at least at first, I always have qualms about where this defense is right now, and obviously a couple of guys on the blue line maybe are being asked to do a little too much. But I got to give some roses to Logan Stanley here. He pulled off a really big final PK at the end of the third period, right before the end of the game. The Jets were scrambling, he was scrambling, and yet he made a couple of really key blocks and ended up just finally using his 6'7" frame to box out some guys. I thought he had a massive kill. He actually, I think, got the game jacket, if I recall correctly. Really gutsy PK. And, when you're the Jets and you don't have as many of your key personnel for this unit, anyone who can really show off is just impressive. Great to see. Barron has become a bit of a specialist on the PK. And the same can also be said for Shifley and Connor. They've been really noticeable on the PK lately. We've seen Chenoweth kind of do some of these power PK moments, and I really feel like the power killing stuff has been really impressive this year. First couple games, you already have a couple of goals out of it. You've seen the Jets outcreate opponents on the power play at times, which is just crazy. You'd never imagine that on a PK, the Jets would be the more dangerous opponent. But, in some of these circumstances where the Jets have been really aggressive, they've been forcing counters, they've gotten odd man rushes, a couple of moments where they could even have had maybe an extra point or two. Really, really good stuff, really good coaching, and just really good individual performances from some of these Jets PKers. So keep that up. The PK becoming a bit of a weapon, and even kind of helping to balance out maybe the dip slightly in the top power play unit, I think would be a tremendous little asset, and it would also change how opponents have to game plan on their PK or on their PP. If their power plays are not as dangerous and it kind of gives the Jets more room to work, maybe opponents are a little more conservative. That would be a huge boost, right? Reduce the workload on Helly because he's probably going to have to do more at 5v5 for the next couple of weeks. And if the PK can just kind of plant that seed of doubt in opponents' minds, maybe that's going to be a bit of a real psychological and tactical boost for the Jets going forward. So, really good stuff to see. The PK continues to show developments and improvements. And if Chenoweth is going to have this unit doing this kind of stuff going forward, I think there is really nothing you can truly complain about. These are all developments I think that could really help the Jets survive these next few weeks. Winnipeg is still shorthanded, and I think a lot of the opponents that they're going to face may not be as difficult as like a Utah or a Dallas, but they're still going to be teams with some really quality NHLers, and the Jets cannot sleep for a moment. So going to be an interesting next few weeks. Of course, we've got the Islanders tomorrow, and that'll be fascinating. The Jets haven't faced New York in a little bit, so we'll have to see how that goes. My suspicion is that the Jets should win. It is an afternoon road game, though, so we'll see. But I feel like the Jets should win like 3-1 or something. That's my prediction. I'm going to go with it. Curious to know your predictions. Drop them in the comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Now, in this game against LA, the Jets did pick up another back-end injury, which, not ideal when you're dealing with so many injuries already. Seems like the Jets might finally be calling on Colin Miller. We'll chat about why coming right up. You just realized your business needed to hire somebody yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy, just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's Sponsored Jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. I've used Indeed when I was looking for work, and I can personally attest to the resume builder being powerful. It matched me almost instantly to jobs that fit my work experience, a lot of my domain expertise, even my salary requirements. So if you're a business looking to hire quality candidates quickly, Indeed is fantastic. And now you can speed up your hiring process with the $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on the Locked On Winnipeg Jets podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed, is all you need. Hey, friends, and welcome back to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we're chatting a little bit about the Jets having some slight injury stuff going on. Obviously, Winnipeg is trying to survive as it is. And, Sandberg and Lowry may be skating, but the Jets are still shorthanded, right? These guys are still going to be a little bit further away. And for the Jets, they now have to contend with the loss of Hayden Fleury. Fleury took a shot off his knee yesterday, and it seems like it might be a little bit more serious, right? Whatever it is, he's going to be out for likely tomorrow's game against the Islanders. They have recalled Cale Clegg and sent Brad Lambert down to the Moose, which is not shocking, right? Lambert hasn't been playing yet, and of course, he is waiver exempt. So naturally, you might be wondering, well, is Clegg going to play? And the answer is no. Clegg is actually just going to be a reserve. The Jets are going to be calling upon Colin Miller finally to play alongside Luke Schenn. Now, Miller Schenn is, it's an okay third pairing. I probably wouldn't do it this way. Honestly, would I prefer maybe Miller Pionk? I don't really know. I don't think either option is necessarily optimal, and that's kind of what you're dealing with right now. If I had to choose, I think Shen Miller is fine. Just getting Miller in period is probably helpful, right? You don't want to have all of Fleury, Shen, and Stanley being your entire bottom couple of pairings because you can hide one rough pairing, you can't hide two, and I think the Jets have really struggled with that, especially with Fleury Pionk kind of having to play elevated minutes and not really winning a lot of those minutes. So Miller coming back in should be a huge boost. We'll see how it actually works out. The Islanders are not a team where I would feel particularly worried about the blue line being super noticeable. I say this, and that might not be the case, right? The Islanders obviously have some new talent. Schaefer's come in now, so maybe things go a little bit differently. But I still feel like the Jets should be fine in this game. That's what I'm feeling, right? The Islanders are one of those teams that I talked about a couple of days ago about being, part of the easier stretch than what the Jets had to immediately start kind of coming out of the gun with against Dallas. If Fleury is slated to miss some time, it'll be interesting to see how the Jets respond. Clegg obviously is not a guy that I would particularly feel is likely to be a full-time NHLer. But as some insurance against further injuries, I feel like this is fine. For Winnipeg, I think the biggest thing going forward is just trying to stay healthy, manage the injury stuff. I think if one thing, is a positive here, is that the Jets generally have quite a bit of depth on the 5 and 6D front, right? They've got lots of blue liners who can step up reasonably. If Ville Heinola kind of takes off with the Moose again, maybe he gets more time. You've got, of course, Miller, who was honestly, a guy who should have been starting. It is what it is. Not super shocked that he hasn't been because for whatever reason, the Jets don't seem to love his game as much as some of the other guys. But I think for Winnipeg, right, you're in a situation where you are really just trying to survive, make it through the next few weeks, try and stay healthy. You really can't afford any star players to get injured now. The theme going forward really is just survive, make it through, and the rest should fall into place. We are not too far off from November now, so that's pretty good news. Obviously, the season really just started, but because we had an October 9th start date, and we had a lot of these injuries occurring more during preseason or even before then, the timing does kind of benefit Winnipeg here. I think the fact that this happened before the season really got underway and the Jets were knee deep into it might be a bit of a blessing. So if you're going to have an injury crisis, might as well have it when you are not playing quite as many games. Obviously, the schedule is not going to be completely empty, and I think for the Jets, that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. But so far, you're 1-1. You probably just want to stick around 500 or better for the next few weeks. Hellebuck looks like he's already in Vezina form, so that's going to give you a huge boost. You have some defenders you can call upon. Shiberkov, for his part, filling in for Cole Perfetti, I thought has had some pretty solid games. Yeah, he hasn't had like any points yet, and I know that people might be expecting him to be a bit of a goal scorer. I know I certainly am. But I feel like his little transition details, some of the setup plays he's had, some of the passes he's made, that's all positive stuff. I think he has a more versatile game than I was expecting, and that's good, right? Chibrikov is trying to prove that he deserves to stay in the NHL, and I think so far, again, the points haven't come yet. That's really true of the second line in general. Taves hasn't exactly scored his first yet either, even though he's had a couple of opportunities to do so. But I like what I've seen from Chibi. Chibi looks like an NHLer, and I think that's a really good testament to the drafting and ability that the Jets have demonstrated in their amateur department recently. The guys that they've started picking up have the sort of archetype of being, a high offensive motor, good skaters, fast on the puck. It's just how do you translate that to more routine NHL success? And hopefully Chibrikov starts to put a couple of points away because he's gotten close. He's had a pass or two that I thought could have been converted into some really good goal scoring opportunities. So overall, I think the Jets are going to have to find out what they've got in their farm system right now. I think this is probably the best opportunity you're going to have. It's still early in the season. You still have time to sort of experiment. Again, if you're going to have an injury crisis, this is probably the time of year to have it. I think the timelines work a little bit more favorably for the Jets, gives you a little bit more evaluation period time. And it seems like so far, Arneal is making the most of it. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see when Lambert comes back up. Or even if he does, Fleury's injury is day to day. So I don't quite know what's going to happen. I'm not really sure how this is going to work once Fleury is cleared to return to duty. But, Lambert, he'll probably have to rotate in at some point, right? You are still without Cole Perfetti week to week. So Jibrikov probably is not going to get every game. Brad's going to have to play at some point if they're trying to evaluate him. I think that this is probably the way that I would do it. Split their starts every few games, see what you can get out of each player, right? Is, Taves going to fit better with Lambert? Lambert's skill is high in skating, lots of quick offensive movement, a great release. Maybe he can kind of be some of your rush offense, and maybe Trubnikov can be a really versatile middle six guy who can be that sort of grindy, forechecky forward who can also provide transition to your third line. So if both can find a way to earn more NHL time, I think that'd be great. Lambert obviously has I think the ceiling that a lot of us are hoping still turns into a top six player. I don't know if that's ever going to be the case. I still think he can be at least a 40 to 50 point guy, and I do feel some level of confidence that he's going to be good. I just don't know how good yet. And that's kind of the big question, right? Is he going to take flight? Is he going to grow his game? We will just have to wait and see, right? But these injury opportunities for the Jets are going to be, a real chance for some of the kids that we wouldn't normally see get a chance to actually make the team, especially next season, right? This year, there's really only one spot maybe available for any of the youth. But I think next year there's going to be real chances for more of these kids to reinforce the middle six and give the Jets a little bit of a different look. If you can build a top nine out of what you've got already, plus some of the kids really improving this team, that is kind of the dream. It's how the Jets of old used to be built, and then they would sort of supplement at the TDL and take it over the top. I still think the Jets can reach that point, but they haven't yet, and that's kind of what the season should be for. So, as bad as the injuries are, I think out of great trials and tribulations comes big opportunities, and that is what I'm hopeful for here. I think Winnipeg has a chance to really soar with this group, especially after this season. I don't know that I'm expecting a lot this year, but I think going forward, this can be the start of the foundation that you build upon once you start really building around the edges and getting your core in order. They've certainly got the stars locked up. Now it's time to figure out how to build around the perimeter and start building, a team that maybe doesn't have the most elite superstar, one of one game breakers, but can still be really darn good when you play this whole group together. Now, speaking of opportunities for youth and building that group, guess what? The Moose are here, and darn, do they look good if game one is anything to go by. We'll chat about their success coming right up. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right, pick a bet, put $5 down, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. if you are somebody who loves following the stats of football, whether it's passing yardage, QB rating, even points, I mean, this is just a great chance for you to win big. FanDuel is safe, secure, and easy. And if you're already watching the game, why not add a little bit more fun to your outing? We know that, watching a team like the Ravens may not be the most fun this year, but if you're somebody who loves diving into the individual matchups and how a team like this might recover and win against an opponent, maybe say like the Texans in the future or even the Chiefs, this is your chance to win big. So what are you waiting for? Visit fanduel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Hey, friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, you're seeking so much for rejoining us in tonight's episode, as we're just chatting about, of course, the Jets having their first couple of games. Guess who else had their own game recently? The Manitoba Moose on Friday. And, the Moose, their first game against Laval was very interesting. Laval is a dangerous, very good team. We know that the Habs have started to amass a lot of young talent. And last year, I think, what was it? The Rocket were 3-1 against the Jets. So, Winnipeg coming into this had to find a way to really stand tall. Sorry, I say Winnipeg because, sometimes I mix up the Moose and Winnipeg. I mean, they might as well be baby Winnipeg, right? You're in the same arena. You've got a lot of these young talents. And increasingly, I feel good about a lot of the kids that are on this team. Salamonson had a point himself and looked pretty good in the Jets' top four. You had Braden Yeager scoring his first AHL goal just a couple minutes into the game. A great feed from Colby Barlow on a counter to Yeager. Yeager did not miss. And then from there, the Moose just went to work. Gosh, I got to stop calling them the Jets. The Antlers really do feel kind of like a proto version of the Jets, man. It does have some of those similar feelings. That also includes some of the defensive issues. I think, Manitoba did struggle a little bit with Laval's speed. But guess what? Just like the Jets have Connor Hellebuck, the Moose apparently have Dom DiVincentis. DiVincentis put up a massive performance, 36 out of 37 saves, first star on the evening, and I thought he looked stupendous. He's played so well that I'm starting to wonder about, after this year, does he make the jump to the NHL? At this point, I don't know how many more years in Manitoba with the Moose he really needs. Does he start to need NHL caliber shooters sooner than later? I don't know. We'll wait until the end of the season to kind of feel a little bit more of that out. But if he is ready to make the jump, having Comrie get a chance maybe to be a starter somewhere while DiVincentis takes the backup duties to Hellebuck might not be the worst thing. I'm personally rooting for Comrie to do whatever it is that he wants to, whether he wants to stick around with the Jets or move on. But regardless of his choice, having DiVincentis in your system as a guy who could easily be a potential backup in the future, I feel is fantastic. And if DiVincentis continues to excel, once Hellebuck starts to get on the older side and towards the end of his contract, does DiVincentis maybe eventually take over the reins? Guys at his age, maybe starting out at 26, 27, maybe he eventually becomes Winnipeg's future starter. Obviously, Hellebuck is going to be very good for very many more years. Zero question about that. But DiVincentis is a young kid, and by the time that he's ready to maybe take over the start, maybe Hellebuck will kind of be in the twilight and ready to start taking a step back as he nears the end of his contract. So that's a really long way away, and I don't think we're really looking at that anytime in the near future, but just something to think about for maybe the next decade of great Jets hockey. In terms of the Moose, though, I think a lot of what we saw was just a lot of hard work. Some of the goals that Manitoba scored were off of some deflections, some funky little rushes and stuff. They don't always ask how you do it. Sometimes you just have to find a way. And I think Manitoba definitely did that. It was a very workmanlike performance. Again, I do think, Laval had the edge in dangerous chances and certainly on the rush. But overall, the Moose did their thing. I think this Manitoba team is going to take some time to gel. You have a lot of new kids coming in. You've got a lot of new players joining for the first time. Yeager, Fagemo obviously joining for the first time. You're seeing some new names like Dewar join. And sure, these guys maybe have had success at other levels or with other AHL teams, but this is the first time they're all here. I would like to see more of Chase Yoder. He hasn't played his first game yet. I'm hoping that he rotates in. I really liked what Yoder did during camp, and I think he could actually become a really solid top six option for the Moose. And honestly, I do wonder if he actually maybe earns a role with the Jets down the road. I thought he looked really impressive during preseason and camp. Maybe he gets a shot to be something a little bit more. So we'll have to wait and see. But this Moose team, if you have not started watching, I highly recommend it. They have a game Sunday afternoon, really hard to miss. I think the Manitoba squad this year is going to be fighting for a Calder Cup. It might take a little bit to get there, but I am very confident in this team's ability. I think they are planting some really winning seeds ahead of future Jets seasons. And if this is where kind of the next great Jets core starts to build that culture of success, I am excited. I know that I was a little harsh on this past offseason, but what I do say and what I will say about it is that what Winnipeg did to really overhaul Manitoba's roster, I think should absolutely be celebrated. I would say keep doing this stuff. This is really positive, and I think for the Jets going forward, this is sort of where you're going to start breeding your culture of success. Begin with a Moose, build out, and have success at both levels. I think the Jets can have a great organization on top of what they already have. And if you build success at both levels, maybe you start really getting those earlier commitments from kids. Get them excited about making the pros. Get them thinking about how their first year with the Jets org might result in some kind of hardware, even if it's not at the NHL level yet. So excited about it. Curious to know how you feel about it. Are you as hyped about the Moose season as I am? It should be a really fun time. I'm looking forward to it, but curious to know how you all feel about it. Drop your thoughts and comments below or at my social medias at HL Living Loco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Throughout this week, of course, we'll have some more Jets coverage and previews ahead of some of these games. We'll have a preview ahead of the Jets versus Islanders tomorrow, and then, of course, Tuesday, probably some thoughts about that game and continuing Moose coverage throughout the season. So, as always, I thank you so much for listening and making us your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you back here tomorrow, so have a great night. And as always, go Jets, go.